Hi and welcome to the BioStock studio here at Medicom Village in Lund. Today I have Sven Kili, board member of Swedish company Xintela with me. Xintela works with regenerative medicine and cancer, mainly focusing on cartilage damage and brain tumors. Welcome, Sven.
Thank you very much.
Very nice to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background to start with?
I trained as an orthopedic surgeon, and for the last 18 years I've been working in the cell and gene therapy space. I was fortunate enough to lead the development and commercialization of the first cell therapy product, which was a combined cell therapy product, and I also led the development and commercialization of the first ex vivo gene therapy product. I currently do some consulting for Xintela. As you've mentioned, I'm also on the board and I'm acting as Chief Medical Officer. In addition to that, I also hold an honorary professorship at the University College London for work in a master's degree looking at training new people in cell and gene therapy development and commercialization. In addition to that, I also sit on the board for the Canadian Centre for Commercialization of Regenerative Medicine. I chair the Bioindustry Association on Cell and Gene Therapy, and I also sit on the board of the Standards Coordinating Body for Regenerative Medicine.
And since 2014 you've been a board member of Xintela, like you said. How would you say that Xintela has changed and advanced during your time at the company?
During my time at the company, I've been very fortunate to see some massive changes in the company. When I started, it was really a teeny tiny startup that had a good idea, that I really thought had some promise. In the time I've been able to be associated with the company, they've really grown into a company that has been able to show that that idea really has merit. And the technology has grown tremendously to the point where we've actually been able to show proof of principle of this platform technology, both in the osteoarthritis space, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and as you alluded to, in the cancer space also, where there's been some really exciting new technology developments. And lastly, also in their building of a new manufacturing facility. So Xintela has really grown tremendously, and it's really exciting to have been part of this amazing development.
You mentioned here Xintela's idea. What would you say is what makes Xintela unique?
I think Xintela has a number of unique aspects to it. All of them are predicated on the platform of the alpha-10 selection. Within the stem cells, as we've talked about, is in the osteoarthritis space. And really what sets Xintela apart from all of the other companies developing cell therapies for osteoarthritis is the alpha-10 selection capabilities. And this allows the company to select cells that are really very well suited for the osteoarthritis space, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of moments. I think what also makes them unique, as I've alluded to, is their manufacturing. So the company has built its own manufacturing facility, and this is something that's completely unheard of for such a small company. And it really allows Xintela as a company to define its own future and set its own path from a manufacturing perspective, because advanced therapies are really critical in terms of manufacturing. And so this is really, really important. And then also for such a small company, the pipeline is very broad and the applications are broad. And so we've already talked about the oncology. And so developing therapeutics in oncology, which is an amazing growing space, is also really, really exciting. So I think for a very small company, they're really punching way above their weight.
Moving on then to talk a little bit about the actual results and the studies. There were recently results from a study done with stem cells in horses that was published in, let me get this right, the American Journal of Sports Medicine. Can you tell us exactly what that study showed?
Absolutely. So first of all, we're really excited to have been published in the American Journal of Sports Medicine. And the reason for this is the premier journal and is really read by all of the key investigators, both clinical and scientists, that are involved in the space. So this is really a flagship publication. We're also incredibly grateful to our collaborators at Cornell University who did all of the work and treated the horses. And so they really helped us to show the benefit of the technology. So really the bottom line of what the technology showed was that the alpha-10 selected cells were able to prevent the degeneration of cartilage, so minimize or reverse the cartilage damage while preventing further degeneration. And this is really, really important because the actions that we saw of the cells were both immunomodulatory, so on the joint itself, but also on the cartilage and bone. So really, to break this down, osteoarthritis is a disease of the entire joint, and it affects inflammation, it affects the cartilage, and it also affects the bone. And up until now, none of the therapies that we have or that we're aware of in development can address all of these aspects. All therapies currently are aimed at symptomatic treatment, either pain relief or with steroids trying to decrease the inflammation within the joint. But what we saw now was really concrete proof of concept and proof of principle that these cells were able to have an effect on the inflammatory environment within the cell, inflammatory environment within the joint, but also an effect on the cartilage and on the bone. So what very often happens is the bone tends to thicken up because the cartilage is being damaged. And what we were able to see is this didn't happen, and we were able to have that cartilage reconstituted. So this is really, really exciting. In addition, this is our final animal study, and this allows us from a legal regulatory perspective to move into human trials. So this opens the way for us to move into human trials. It allows us also to show that this idea of using alpha-10 selected cells is really as good as we thought it was, and potentially opens us up to being able to develop therapies for animals also. So in general, really exciting.
I think you've opened the way for the next question there as well. So what is the next step then in this project?
So we have a few next steps. The first of which is, as I've already alluded to, this is the final animal study, and this allows us now to move into a human study. And the human study is really important because that then is the first of a number of studies that will bring us closer to having an approved human product. But additionally, being able to show such great results in the horse has opened the way to be able to develop this therapy for animals. Now, not only for horses, but also potentially for dogs and other companion animals. And this is really critical because it has created a lot of excitement from a number of potential collaborators and companies that we might work with who would want to develop this therapy for animals, both horses, dogs, and potentially other animals. So it's really opened the way for us tremendously and is a really critically important milestone for the company.
You also have a stem cell product called XSTEM-OA, which is about to enter a phase 1/2A study in Australia. Can you say anything about the timeline in terms of that project?
Absolutely. So this is really the next phase in our development, and the study that's coming up will be called what's known as a first-in-human study. So this is typically a study that looks at a product's safety, and that's really the only criteria for it. What we will be doing is we'll be doing something slightly differently. Obviously, safety is paramount and the most important thing to look at, but we'll also be looking at dosing. So we'll be defining the best dose that we'll then be taking forward into the further stages of clinical development and commercialization. We'll be doing the study in Australia because the Australian government is very proactive towards companies developing therapies in Australia. So that's very positive from the company perspective. What we find really exciting is that the Australian regulatory system is also well aligned with the European and the US system. So any data that we generate there is seamlessly moved into Europe and the US. So this allows us really to accelerate. In general, the patients in Australia are very active. There's a very good healthcare system there, which will hopefully bring us access to the correct patients for this study in a very rapid way, and that hopefully allows us to accelerate the development program moving forward. So this is really the next stage of Xintela's growth and a very exciting start.
Wanted to pick up on something that you've already mentioned a bit, and that is the fact that Xintela has its own GMP stem cell manufacturing facility. So how are you planning on capitalizing on that, and what kind of benefits does it bring you to have your own facility?
So first of all, the fact that Xintela has its own manufacturing facility is absolutely unique amongst small companies. Even with larger companies in the cell and gene therapy environment, it's normal to use what's called a contract manufacturer. And very often these companies tend to use contract manufacturers all the way up until late clinical development or even into commercialization. The reason for doing that is building manufacturing facilities tends to be very capital intensive and can use up a lot of money for companies initially. The trade-off with that is you don't have the freedom of the way your product is developed. And for cell and gene therapies, the way the therapies are developed is critically important to their efficacy, to how well they work, how safe they are, how well you can get them out. So Xintela's decision to invest in manufacturing early on, I think, is really, really a smart play. Because what it's allowed the company to do is to really focus on process development, getting that product right the first time around, getting it right early on. Any changes that need to be made can be made rapidly without having to use the roadblocks and getting involved with another company and convincing them to make changes. It can all be done in-house rapidly. What this does is in the long term saves money tremendously, allows a much less complicated development program, because typically when companies have to move into their own manufacturing, it's a long time. It can take anywhere from 9 to 18 to even 24 months, and there are invariably complications. And what we're doing is we're limiting all of those from an early stage. So it really adds a tremendous amount of value to the company and its ability to develop a product.
And when do you expect to have the final GMP approval from the Swedish authorities then?
So at the moment, we are in the final processes of doing process development. There's an enormous amount of work to do to validate the manufacturing process that goes on. We have to run what are called technical batches that run through, that show that the process is working, it's working well, it's working the way it needs to be. The amount of paper from the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, is absolutely staggering. So there's an enormous amount of work that's going on at the moment, and we'll be applying to the Swedish Manufacturing Authority in the second half of this year with the aim of having it approved before the end of the year. So things are really progressing rapidly.
So staying with the forward-looking theme, are there any other areas that you can see Xintela moving into in the future?
Absolutely. As I mentioned right at the beginning, the platform of Xintela are using these, the Alpha 10 selection allows Xintela to move into a variety of different areas. So we've focused now on osteoarthritis. As we've also mentioned, this has opened up the oncology space, and we've had some very exciting results in the oncology space recently. In addition to this, we're exploring a number of other areas. The most obvious would be in the musculoskeletal space, and we've started doing a little bit of work on some new indications there, and so hopefully we'll be able to share a little more about that in the coming months. Additionally, we've also hinted previously at potential indications within the central nervous system. And so that's a really exciting space. In general, the central nervous system is not well supplied in terms of medicines, be they small molecules or cell and gene therapy, and it's a really exciting space. So we're very, very positive about some of the early data that we've had from there. So there's really an enormous scope going forward, and we intend to be able to optimize that as we find the capacity and going forward.
And finally, what milestones do you see Xintela reaching, maybe within the next year or so?
So within the next year, there's an enormous amount of work, and I'm really excited about everything that we have ahead of us. So as I've already mentioned, the manufacturing facility and getting that certified and approved. I've also, as I've mentioned, the first in human clinical study. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment to prepare for that, and that we will be starting within the next 12 months. We also hope to have some collaborations starting in terms of animal health products. So we will not be developing animal health products in-house, but there are a lot of companies, animal health companies that are very excited, and so we're in discussions with some of those. So hopefully there'll be some good news from there. Additionally, as we've already released some data on the oncology projects, we've had some very positive new data coming out for that, and so there's a lot of excitement around potential collaborators there. So for that and the Targenta programs, I think there's going to be some really interesting developments within the 12 months. So it's a really action-packed 12 months that we have ahead of us. Lots to keep us busy, lots to keep us out of trouble.
Right, well, that's what we like to hear, isn't it? Well, we look forward to following you during the next year then, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to coming and bring you lots more good news.
Oh, I'll be happy to hear it.
Thank you so much.